All right. So good morning, everyone. And today is Monday, October 4th, from Oyotunji African Kingdom. And we're going to be having people join us in a few minutes to discuss, African traditional societies. So this is sort of a break from the paper that you wrote over the weekend to give you some entertainment and at the same time some history that it's not from your textbook, African history before 1500, and surprisingly it's right here in the Americas. So behind me, I don't know if you can see the banner that says Oyotunji. So the village is located in Sheldon, Beaufort County, South Carolina. And this is my second time actually visiting the place. Over the summer was my first time, but I heard about this location since I was in high school. And one of my high school teachers, my gym teacher, over 25 years ago, did inform me about this village founded by ex-descendants of transatlantic slave trade who have traced their ancestry back to Yoruba nation or Yoruba kingdom in southwestern part of Nigeria. And of course, in parts of Benin Republic. So it's a Yoruba village, Yoruba kingdom here in the Americas where a lot of the preservation of culture and tradition is being done. And if you visit, you're going to learn about the different African gods, the way of life in Africa prior to, the transatlantic slave trade, prior to the European scramble for Africa, prior to colonization, which today starts our discussion on colonization. But start our discussion on the scramble for Africa. But because you've just finished the paper on Africa before 1500 up to the transatlantic slave trade, I thought since I'm here to give you a snippet of life in Oyotunji and how former descendants of those who were victims of the transatlantic slave trade, how their descendants have built a community in South Carolina and carrying on the traditions of their ancestors. It was a very impressive weekend with Yoruba descendants from Nigeria visiting and collaborating with Yoruba descendants who are now in South Carolina in Oyotunji village. So at 10 o'clock, people are gonna hopefully be joining to talk with us. But I think, Iya, do you want to say something quickly? Yes. Okay. So we have one of the elders, one of the pioneer of when this village was founded in the 70s. Her name is Iya Shangogbeni Adefomi. So she's a Yoruba priestess of the Oyotunji village, and she's the chief Iya Baba Onishango. She's based in New York City, so we'll have more interaction in New York City. But for now, she's getting ready to go back to New York. So let me give her my phone. Like I mentioned, unfortunately, I don't have my computer because Wi-Fi over here is not the best thing. So I'm using my phone. So yeah.
Good morning. How is everybody out there in video land? We're here in Olatunji village. I am the chief Iya Baba Onishango. I'm 51 years in Ocha here. I was made in the 70s. I'm a founder of Olatunji village, and I will hope to be seeing much more of you guys. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Odavo.
Yes, and say what you, why did you decide to be part of the founding members of Oyotunji in the 70s?
Well, because I came very young, the drums led me, it's a story. The drums led me to the temple on 118th Street where Olatunji was founded. And I went in and they were playing drums and I just said I wanted to be a part of this. The spirit took me to all of this spirit. That's how I became involved, through spirit.
And you know, in the African traditional society, spirit is very important because the spirit, the bell, the drumming, that's why there's a respect for those who drum.
Exactly.
They're able to, you know, bring out the spirit of, you know, the ancestors and the people.
And of course,
I know this weekend we had a lot of drumming,
yes.
a lot of, you know, prayers were led through the drumming, led through those calling.
Yes. We have lots of that in Olatunji village. Every Sunday, we worship Obatala, and there's drumming even there. And we have very good drummers, young drummers here, young and old. And the drum is a big part of our tradition here. And as everybody knows, the drum is sacred to Shango. Shango was the first not compound, temple that was built in Olatunji. So we have a lot of respect for Shango and the drum.
Do you have any question for Iya? So Iya is a respectful way of calling those who are older. You know, you say man, you say Iya. So everyone pretty much is a mother. So in the African traditional society, we call those who we respect who are older than us Iya. So every Iya is everyone's mother, or even Yeye.
Right.
You know, so you know,
Right.
they don't have to be your biological mother. People live together in compounds. So I think in a few minutes after Kabiyesi, and Kabiyesi means the king, when he comes, we may be able to do a little tour, and you're going to see that people actually live together, so connected together, and do things together. It's a collectivist society. Most African societies are collectivist society where people do things together. You know, you have you know, households for generations where grandmothers, great grandmothers, wives, husbands, uncles, aunties, everyone lives in the same area. So, and then the children play together, eat together. There's no distinction in, oh, go to your mom's house for lunch. Everyone is just, you know, together. Yeah, and do a lot of things together. So, do you have any question for Iya? All right. We'll probably be doing more interaction in New York City. Yeah. But yeah, Adupe. Yes, you can call in. Okay. So the king is here. He's going to call in from his phone. And so you get to see Africa, at least firsthand, from, you know, some of the readings that you had in class. And also how at least an African village kind of looks like. In the meantime, before the king comes to speak to us, I'm just going to show you around. So this is the courtyard where a lot of programs, activities take place. And if you see behind me, they have, you know, some of the gods and goddesses represented. Of course, you know, I don't know most of them. So I have to also come to Oyotunji to learn about them. You see behind, and if you've taken any African civilization class, you find that this type of structure behind me, you tend to find them in like Mali Empire. If you look at the library in Timbuktu, it's sort of similar, like the structure. If you also look at northern Nigeria, you know, which is of course close to Mali, you know, you're going to find that these types of structures are very similar in those locations. So I'm just going to give you a little tour before our next speaker comes. And of course, the Ankh symbol, the Ankh of life. For those of you who know about Egypt, you will find that the Ankh symbol represents life. It represents procreation in terms of, you know, the woman being the giver of life, procreation, and life in every aspect. So let me walk back here and show you. Okay, so behind here, there's some restriction, I guess, to that's we have. Okay, so the king says I may go inside. All right, so here they have tombs of maybe some of the founders of the Oyotunji village, and representing the different people who have meant or have value to this kingdom. And here we have um, a shrine for Obatala. So of course, unless you're into like the African traditional religion, you're not going to know most of these names that I'm calling. Of course, many Nigerians also have lost their own understanding of who these gods or people are. But it's very impressive that you can find, most of them represented here. So let me give the phone to the king so he can tell us a little bit. Kabiesi, all right, we are ready. Are you coming? Okay. Okay.
This is myself, Chief Baba Jungle.
So let's see if that can show. So here are pictures of founders of Oyotunji. And this is the Iya Shango that I just spoke to you earlier.
Not all are founders, some have what they do right up on the internet.
Yeah, because the class is so early. Many people are sort of still sleeping, and we've had such a busy weekend. And I believe this is dedicated to a king in yes, in the Benin Republic. Ben Hansen was I believe, maybe king of Dahomey before either he was disposed of by the Europeans or something like that in Benin Republic. So keep in mind, Benin Republic is different from the ancient Benin Kingdom that is still in Nigeria today. So the ancient Benin Kingdom is the Edo people, and then Benin Republic, former Dahomey. You may have read about Dahomey. They have a lot of warriors, female warriors, male warriors. So Ben Hansen was one of their kings before the topic we're going to be talking about today. And there's the Kabiyesi. He's walking to us. We'll be discussing with him in a few minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Ekaro. Welcome to Oyotunji.
This is King Adefumi the second. His father was the original founder of African state, and now we have the pleasure of discussing with King Adefumi the second. Kabisi, do you want to join on your phone or do you want to speak?
I'm joining on my phone.
Okay, so he's going to join from his phone. All right, so let's give him a few minutes to get on his phone.
Want me to go get you one?
Sorry that it's a village thing, but because we had to just make arrangements to do the meeting this morning. Well, I made the arrangements over the weekend, but because people were so busy and tired from all the festivities, Kabiesi, are you on now? And we also have Iya Maria Ayodele. She's the executive director of Oyotunji. So if you want to have a tour here or any activities, you contact Iya Maria. And of course, I'm going to get you all their communication. Okay. All right. So Kabiesi is on the Zoom call now. So we're going to let him actually lead the discussion. He's going to discuss African traditional societies before European contact, because in our class today, African history from 1500 to present, we're going to be, we've discussed Africa from 1500, before 1500, looking at the different interaction in African traditional societies before European contact. We've discussed trade and commerce, and trade and commerce includes Arab slave trade, the different types of commerce and, way of life of Africans prior to European contact. And then we discussed European contact and also how the transatlantic slave trade started and ended. And you just completed a paper. So today we're going to be discussing with Kabiesi, how Oyotunji was founded, why the preservation of African traditional cultures and tradition is so important and key to what Oyotunji village does. And then any questions that you would like to ask him, he'll be available. So Kabiesi, you have the floor.
You're muted.
Okay, how about that? Is that better?
Much better, thank
Oh,
you.
it's going on and on. Okay.
Can you hear him? Okay, yes.
Is that better?
Yes.
Of course, yes. I am His Royal Majesty Oba Adejigbe Adefumi, the King of the Yoruba of North America, here based out of Oyotunji Village in South Carolina. And I'm extremely happy to be here this morning to be able to share a bit of information as it pertains to the intricate histories of the African people, especially those who I've learned quite a bit about in the West Bank or on the West Coast of Africa. Interestingly enough, people thought that the recreation of an African village in North America was not needed and it would be backward and it would set the race back, so to speak. However, many people who thought that way were thinking from a purely colonial mindset in that Oyotunji represents the ancient tradition of our ancestors, all the way back to the spiritual ways, the spiritual sacrifices and the like. And many people consider that, old African culture doesn't need to be around anymore because it's modern times. And so old African culture is needed because one word can embody African culture throughout the centuries. And I like to use the word surplus because African nations were designed to create a surplus and to create an environment that helped create a large individual. And so there's a saying in Oyotunji where we say, African culture creates big people. European culture creates big buildings. And so in a nutshell, that could give you a little information as to the motives of African tradition and culture. Prior to European incursion into West Africa, many African peoples lived according to their traditional governments. And a lot of traditional governments were seemingly patriarchal. The reason we say seemingly is because a man is generally the king or the head chief, but then there are powerful women surrounding him or even selecting the chief to represent, as it were, because it has nothing to do with patriarchy or being sexist. It's just that in nature, Africans are nature-based people, organic people. The male figure is always the protector of the family, or is a representative of the protection or representative of the family, either as a king or a chief. And so with this structure, you had the ancestors, of course, were a part of daily life as well. Traditional African people venerated their ancestors and asked them for guidance. And so the things that would be done in the community, the things that the ancestors would tell them to do, the people subsequently did. And so then if the ancestors are speaking to you and governing your tradition and your tribe or your nation from the spirit world, then you are obviously involving supernatural incursion, supernatural directions, if you will, supernatural orders being taken from the spirits. And so then you have the council of elders. A council of elders is always necessary because you have to have a group of people who embody the tradition, who remember the tradition before the young people were born, and they are also there to remind everyone that tradition must be kept as best their ability. And so you also have the chiefs, the elders, not the chiefs, but the landowners, people who own land. And people who own land in the community are taught to protect it and serve it well. And because in the Yoruba tradition, especially here at Oyotunji, we went back to our ancient practice when it came to acquire land in the town. So if someone wants to come to Oyotunji and acquire land to build a small structure or build a bungalow or a house, then we would do what our ancestors did. We don't sell the land, we give them the land, we supply them with the land. And the Africans did that primarily because there's enough land and nobody generally owns the land. And so here at Oyotunji, we offer you a piece of land as long as you take the pledge of oath and continue to maintain it here at Oyotunji. And so that's one of the traditional ways our ancestors saw how to get people to love the land that they own. Because the Yoruba would say that how could you expect a man to fight for something that he could not own? Okay, and so the Yoruba also here at Oyotunji, in terms of using our ancient practices in a modern time, we also have the Ogboni, which is the landowners. The Ogboni is the people who are entrusted with the rules of the community. And they're like the Senate, the Parliament, commissioners, mayors, and people of that stature here at Oyotunji. And then also once a week, speaking of the spirit world, once a week here at Oyotunji, we borrowed from the traditional playbook, the pre-colonial playbook, whereby we utilize the oracle once a week to dictate how we should live our lives and what we should do, how to stay in harmony with our destiny once a week. And so we visit the oracle, the Ifa oracle, once a week here at the kingdom. And of course, in parts of that governmental system are the vassal kings and chiefs of other sections. So now around America, we have created chiefs, we have created obas and priests and high priests and kings to represent and uphold a tradition and work for our people. And that too, once again, is a cut from the ancient playbook of our ancestors. And we're able to utilize these things in a modern time, and they're extremely effective, extremely effective. So in essence, when people say that, that old African culture is old and we don't need to do it anymore, and, let's get rid of it, king, it's too much. Well, I always say, well, listen, everything you do is European. You're speaking old European language when you're speaking English. You're dressing old European. Everything you're doing it old European. The way they design the cities, the way the cuisine is made, all of that is culture. Broccoli is European culture. Cabbage is European culture. Carrots is European culture. Okay, and so to the extent that we start to understand that we're totally surrounded by ancient culture. It's just that here in the West, Africa has been bastardized. The word has been bastardized. The people have been bastardized. People think of Africa as just a negative entity. And of course, the look is changing today. The feel is changing around the world because of the internet. Young people in West Africa have pretty much the same aspirations as any children on the planet. And then to an extent have the same things in terms of trinkets. However, the African traditional model here at Oyotunji requires us to then include the young people as a part of the governing situation in the community. However, they must go through what we call rites of passage. And so that's another playbook or another page we took out of the ancient playbook, whereby when a young person grows up and gets big and gets to, they start getting into musk, then we would take them and put them through a rite of passage at puberty. So at puberty, then they would have to go through a series of rites to prove and to demarcate adulthood. So from this particular point, you're going into adulthood. That's African tradition. You have to give children rights at each stage and increment. You have to have rights at, you have to have your rights at birth is the first birthright, is your first right. At birth, you have your naming ceremony. And that is another page we took out of the ancient playbook here at the Kingdom in South Carolina. We took the naming ceremony page out of the book, which we had yesterday. We had a naming ceremony yesterday for a new member of the community. That is when everyone comes out, dances, sings, and parades, and brings money and food to celebrate the coming of the new child. And each person then, at that particular time, takes an oath to say that they will be there to support that child no matter what. And so this is how Africans create a surplus in their communities, by being inclusive instead of exclusive. You see? And so the young people would go through their rites of passage, and marriage is a rite of passage, which we'll get to in a second. And so we continue to examine and scurry through our ancient playbooks, because there are all the plays necessary for a successful ending in this game we call life. And so also here at the Kingdom, the young men have to walk a 40-mile journey as part of their spiritual development before they recognize as a male. And so once again, we take from our ancient playbook, and we still utilize the tribal markings to identify people's status in the community, to identify who you are, where you're from, and to identify whether you're a man or you are a young boy, because all of the men get marks on their back. And so it's clear that all of these ancient machinations do have a working place in modern society. And case in point, as many European cities and towns socially decay, many people are, and spiritually decay, many people are going to the East to find solace, to find understanding, because it's been left out of the West, seemingly. Compassion seemingly has been left out of the community. And so African Europeans, when they arriving on the shores of Africa, were terribly confused by what they saw. They were terribly confused in terms of the social structure, terribly confused in terms of the dress. Because, you know, our ancestors never really had to wear too many clothes because it's too hot. And of course, European religion and the Catholic religion requires people to shroud themselves completely, almost to the point of disappearing seemingly. However, our ancestors wore flowing clothes if they wore any. Even in a hot climate, they wore flowing heavy cloth made from cotton. And it was large, like an agbada, so that the air could move through. The air could move through and cool off the body. So it's like walking around with your own air conditioning on. And so the Europeans were also terribly confused when in Europe there is only one king or one queen. But if you travel to Yoruba land, you'll find there are many different kings. And so it confused them in terms of one knowing how to approach the people. However, African people in their communities with their surplus lives, and if you have surplus in this world, somebody else is going to want it. And so essentially, and I'm harping and trying to keep this whole thing built around surplus. That same surplus of African traditional cultures is responsible for Africa's degeneration and degradation today. The fact that everyone came to Africa to take, nobody came to bring anything. They came to take gold, they came to take people, they came to take nuts, berries, coltan, mammalum, diamonds, tin, iron ore, bauxite, and the list goes on and on and on. And cocoa, cola, the list just goes on and on and on. The reason being why it is even there for the taking is because our ancestors created a surplus. It's about creating a community to build and love one another and support each other. There were no pimps, there were no prostitutes, there weren't any drunks, there were no homeless children, there were no orphans, there were no homeless people. And so African culture brings light to the human being. And so in the African village, of course, your first rite is your birth, is your naming ceremony. But as you develop, part of a child's development in the community is to have his or her hands on deck as well. So if the parents are yam flour makers, then the children were yam flour makers. If the parents were corn huskers, then the children were corn huskers. If the parents were bakers, then the children were leather makers. On and on and on and on. So there were no need for universities in our traditional towns unless you wanted to travel further up to Djenné or travel up to Timbuktu. And there you will find the ancient, some of the first universities in the world are there at Timbuktu and in Mali. But you wouldn't know that because European society continues to make sure that the world thinks that the total plethora of milk and honey flowed from Europe, when in actuality it flowed from Africa. Africa's surplus is even responsible for the war. The World War II is responsible for World War II because it was the surplus of African slaves being shipped to the West that created a huge amount of wealth and created companies like Lloyd's of London, Citigroup, the Hartford, all of these insurance companies who insured the slave ships and backed them financially. They then were able to create ports. Okay, Europe didn't have any ports until they started dabbling in slavery because they had a whole shipping industry was created off of dabbling in slavery. And so the wealth that was created from slavery fueled the Industrial Revolution in Europe, Africa's surplus. And so when we say that, oh, that African culture is backwards, it's too old, we don't need it no more, that's someone who hasn't examined it and lived it. Because even the music is relevant. Music plays a huge part in the community. And people say, well, African people like to dance, they're rhythmic people. It's not that they're rhythmic people, it's just that the modus operandi of the village was to live in unity with nature. And nature has a rhythm, right? And so you had to have that natural rhythm with the nature, And so it's not that African people like to dance or buck dance or dance all the time. It's living with nature and the rhythm of nature. A lot of Black men in America even walk in the rhythm because that's the rhythm of nature. You could take a child and an African child, and at a very young age, he's already in tune with the rhythm of nature by his DNA, simply by his DNA. And so we give thanks. And as an African, who do you give thanks to? Do you simply give thanks to God? Or do you simply give thanks to the left or the right? Well, part of that ancient playbook, page out of that ancient playbook, was to implement the polytheistic belief system. right? And so when we talk about rhythm, well, in the polytheistic belief system, you have a deity, the deity of the ocean, the deity of water. What is it? What is a rhythm? They even have water drums in West Africa. What is a rhythm? And so that rhythm is carried out through us, the children of Olokun. We the children of Olokun because just like the Jewish people are the children, the favorite children of their God, we're the favorite children of Olokun because we can get anything from Olokun. You know, it's some people think it's magic that the African American was able to create bebop, jazz, rap, rock and roll, salsa. What else we got out there that the African Americans just magically seem to create? It seems like they can just pull it out of the blue. European people can copy it once it's created, but they can't pull it out of the blue because they're not the favorite children of Olokun. And so the spiritual belief systems help us to understand life better than, God giveth and God taketh away. That's too simplistic. And to depend on one deity, one God that's all prevailing. This one God is mean and he's antagonist, and he wants to take your money and he send you to hell if you don't pray to him and doom to damnation for thousands of years. This is bizarre and far from the African mind. Somebody can mute their phone, Iameto. So we got to remember in articulating our mission and in articulating history, we have to see how it can still work in the modern, because we can people love to stay in 14th century Nigeria, but the point of this kingdom wasn't to do that. It was to utilize what we can and make it work for us, because all we were doing in the ghettos of America were utilizing theories and living that basically just came from the plantation. And so if you, every Black community in America primarily still lives off of what they learned from the plantation. They call it modern society or modern culture alike, but if you are in the Black community and around a lot of Black people, then you're gonna see that a lot of the plantation stuff is still there. A lot of the hate is still there, the hate for each other, the backbiting, it's also still there, the thievery, the lack of vision for the next generation, lack of respect for elders. I get to see a lot of this as I move around many Black communities, and that is European way of doing things. And we have to point that out constantly, that once you get to learn the African, you would say, whoa, the European was hell. I'm tough. You would learn that the African is a peaceful individual overall. While at the same time, they're humans like any other humans in the village. They're going to fight. They're going to do things. However, if the kingdom succeeds, it's their fault. If the kingdom fails, then it's their fault. So we then become arbiters of our own destinies. And this is the freedom African people had before slavery. And this has been a part of them for trillions of thousands of years. So just to remove it for a few hundred, 200 or 300 years, doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. So the magic of Africa is still in each African person in the diaspora. Even if you have, in America, they call it the one drop theory. Even if you have one drop of African blood, you're African. And so just as Europeans came in to Africa and saw the belief system and sought to change it, those were parts of the things that helped to destroy Africa. Because imagine if somebody came to Europe and tried to Africanize the European, then they would have to take off all their clothes, because Africans don't wear a lot of clothes, right? So when the Europeans came to Africa, they saw the Africans not wearing a lot of clothes in the heat. They tried to cover them all the way up. You see what I'm saying? So in reverse, imagine this in reverse. If Africans went and settled Europe, which they did, a lot of people don't know this. The cultures of North Africa, General Jebel Tariq went and civilized Europe through Spain. Of course, by then, the Africans were conquered by the Muslims, and the Islamidans conquered North Africa, but they invaded, the Africans were still there, and they invaded Spain in the name of Arabia. And so they taught them how to, they taught them about soap, they taught them how to shave, they taught them street lights, they taught them city planning, they taught them irrigation, they taught them sewage, how to grow strawberries, how to grow tropical fruit, how to grow food, and the like. And so that's why when the British were in Virginia in 1619, they had a hard time living because they was a little further north and didn't know how to grow too much of things. But the Spanish fared better in the tropics because they had been dealing with the Moors for over several hundred years. And the Moors brought the society up. And that's what African culture does. It brings you up. And so it's clear that it's still possible today in modern time. And so the whole thing, getting rid of that old African culture, is too old, it's backwards. Well, European culture is old and backwards too. Actually, it's more backwards because you see what it produces. It produces terrible things. And so the African always share. So anytime you would go from kingdom to kingdom, community, community, you had protocols that you followed. You took gifts, you took money, you took grains, you took cloth, or what have you. And so the whole idea of trade and commerce is an African idea. It's an African concept because you can't trade what you don't have. And Africans have always had things to the point now that everyone's coming to take it. So we can continue to visualize a world that, and remember, the world was controlled by Africa at one point. And it wasn't until the Africans went and blockaded the Black Sea and blockaded the entire area over there in the Baltics and controlled the Mediterranean, then the Europeans experienced Dark Ages, experienced the Dark Ages, experienced the Inquisitions, the fights, the famines, and all those sorts of things. And so the world can't continue to do that again. Each time a people conquer a people, become quote unquote in charge of the world, they just seem to destroy each other. You know, now we have to use the African concept where we're not trying to be in charge of nothing, not trying to take nobody. We just want to utilize the power of humanity as the guiding light going forward, as opposed to economics, as opposed to religion, as opposed to all of the things that just keep human beings in the same spiral. You know, if the Africans, people love to say, well, the Africans will be in control again. And I say, well, what are they going to be in control to do? Same thing the Europeans do. I mean, what's the plan here? It seems like the plan has always been the same thing. Well, if we utilize traditional African concepts in moving forward, then we can help assist the world rather than trying to take over the world or control the world or anything like that. And so I could take some questions possibly. I don't know, you really, how you want me to keep
Can you
going?
talk about this book also that was just launched?
Well, this is the book, the newest children's book in Oyotunji. It's called Alifabeti Yoruba, okay? And it's basically going to get people used to the sounds of the Yoruba alphabet. For instance, there's no C in Yoruba culture, but there is a sound C. In Yoruba culture, there is no Z, okay? And there's no V, okay? And so the reason this book is important is because after European incursion in West Africa, they destroyed the language of the people. I mean, it's like going to Europe and telling the people, you know, can't speak English, you got to speak Yoruba. You know, the people, especially Nigeria, their language was taken from them. And so even here at Oyotunji, in North America, we took another page out of that old playbook, that old ancient African playbook, and utilized our language because we know language is powerful. You know, the English language is a deadbeat language. It's a language that doesn't take you anywhere. You have to use 1 trillion words to explain yourself, and you end up talking at each other rather than communicating. And so once we learn our own language, then you can understand the people. You can understand the people once you learn the language, because the language teaches you how savoir-faire they may be, how much they appreciate women, The language can teach you how much they appreciate children. It can teach you how much they appreciate each other. Okay? Because the Yoruba language is primarily based on proverbs. So there's a lot of proverbs that we use to try to get a point across. Okay? As opposed to trying to explain things for hours and hours and hours. We use a simple proverb, it astounds the whole room. And so these books are for sale in the UK, Canada, South America, Australia, and Africa. And they're available here at Oyotunji as well and via our website. But it's a good read for young people, and it's a wonderful thing to have on your shelf. And it's got a picture of yours truly on it. Yeah? Like here you have Spoon. Spoon is CB, okay? And it's an illustration. And it also teaches you the pronunciation on the bottom in text here. And then you also have, because remember in Yoruba culture, you got two S's. Huh? And somebody thought it was a mirror. You got two S's in the book, a misprint, not a misprint. Yoruba people have two S's. This one is pronounced C, and this one is pronounced she with the dot. Okay, you see the difference? And those are Salubata, and that is a Shibi. Okay? So yeah, that's it. And then you have many, many pages. The Yoruba alphabet goes all the way up to Y, the letter Y. The last letter in the alphabet is Yi. And also, they will learn here in the beginning, somewhere in here, where to go. But somewhere in here, they're going to get to learn the vowels of the Yoruba. A, E, I, O, R, U. Those are vowels. In English, I think their vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. Well, pretty much the same thing. A, E, I, O, R, U. And sometimes Yi in the Yoruba language. And it's for ages 3 and up. That means that you can start at 3 all the way to 60. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kabi. Let's give him a warm round of applause. Thank you very much for being available at such a short notice. Let us open the floor for questions from the class because KBAC has other schedules for today. So please, the floor is open. Any questions that you would like to ask, or if you would like to add to what KBC has said, maybe from your readings or from your travels, or in general, what he has discussed about African traditional societies and the work that Oyotunji village is doing, to educate, to inform, and to promote African cultures and traditions. So the floor is open for the class for any questions or comments. And unmute your mic.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Who is this? Please speak louder and then put your video on so KBS can see you. Who is this? Please speak louder and then.
It's Zach. This is Zach. It's Zachariah. It's Zachariah. Yeah. So
okay, Zach.
I like when you said that you guys are like kind of big on energy and like you guys feed off the environment and you guys help each other out. But I don't really see nowadays, you don't really see that in the cultures, and nowadays you don't really see people helping each other out. And when you said that, the birthright, everything, I found that really interesting. How since you're young, people are gonna be there for you and they're gonna help and support you at a young age.
Of course, yes. That is our tradition, and it helps. It helps a lot. I've seen it. And I know young people, when you turn into a teenager, you're still going to want to run off and do what you want to do, but you still know you have that support mechanism, to come back to. And generally, they come back by the time they're 28, 27, 28, that's when they come back. But it's bizarre that in America, they have like the laws about, they talk about Roe versus Wade and Roe versus Wade. And they say that save the baby. That's a good concept. Yes, they shouldn't kill the baby. I agree. That makes all the sense in the world. But the love for the child has to go further than that. Just to say, okay, you bring them into the world and then lock them up later. It makes no sense. Kill the baby then. might as well not bring them into the world. Because if that's what you're going to do after it gets here, what's the point? And so Republicans and a lot of Christian people in America love to push that concept. Well, pro-life, pro-life, pro-life. Well, if it's pro-life, what happens after they're born and grown? They just want to make sure you're born. Once you're born, just so you can pay, what, government taxes or something? Are you like a energy feeder for them? Because once you're born and you grow up, they forget about your life. So life is very important to African people.
Any other questions? The floor is open, or comments.
I want to go.
Who is this, please?
Shamani. You want me to put my camera on?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hold on.
Yes, Shamani.
I really liked what you said when you were saying that a lot of the stuff that are in like Black culture to today relates back to slavery, because honestly it really does. Like even the way we season our food, even the way we talk to each other, I really realized that. I realized that because I've been doing my research and like with the book, I'm gonna show you the book that I was reading. With this one I was reading, honestly,
Yeah, that's a good book, very good book.
Yes, I love this book. Honestly, everything relates back to slavery. The way we think, even the way how our parents think that we have to leave at 18, everything relates back to slavery. Like literally everything.
Yeah, so when they tell you never forget or tell you to forget slavery, you can't forget it's slavery. You are slavery. And then you got people whose concepts are Christian concepts that's still slavery. To be a Christian means you're a slave. It's just flat out historical facts. It's facts. If your name is Johnny Hamilton, that's slavery. That's a legacy of slavery. So many slavery still exists in so many ways. And here at the village, we just try to get people to realize we got a term. We say, look, man, I'm a Yoruba, but if you start acting out, I could be a nigga. You know what I'm saying? So there's an understanding that there's two different things going on here. And we strive our best to utilize the Yoruba concepts because we see how it supports us. When we start doing the niggerdom stuff, it's
Exactly. And this was not even how life was in Africa. So like even doing the research, taking this class, I realized like we were way better in Africa than we were here because they just took us to work for them. And we're still working to this day. So
of course, yeah. And you still working, the difference may be about $100 a day.
Yes, that's literally the difference.
Or less.
Like $75
yeah,
a day.
When African people learn their culture, they just seem to do better. Yeah.
I love that.
It just seems that way.
Any other questions or comments for the KBC?
I had a question.
Who is this, please?
It's Ellie.
Oh, Ellie. Yes.
I hear chickens in the background, and I'm wondering. Well, I was just curious because I know Europeans basically changed the whole concept of agriculture completely and changed the relationship with animals and just agriculture in general. And so, how do you have animals? Do you grow your own food? How do you navigate like the agricultural world in this day and age, I guess?
Well, very good question. Because at one time they start calling me the Green King or the Kale King because I like to grow stuff. But I know that the entire world, not just the village, everybody has to get into this local food sourcing because as you can see with just this pandemic, if anything happens, if a pin drops in the bucket, it reverberates through the whole system. Mm-hmm. And so babies and pets are fed. That's what I try to get through to people. Babies and pets are fed. You know, men and women feed themselves. And so with that concept, then we try to grow as much as we can each year. We grow just a few things, but we like to scale up exponentially in the future. and also skill. But remember, you can't just start growing stuff. You got to change the mind in people. You see, because people still think that food comes from a grocery store. You know, they can't put nature, spirit, and food together when that should be the way it is. Only because we know from all of the cancers we're experiencing comes from the foods, right? And just like you said, the Europeans, shook up the agricultural world so much that a lot of people don't know which way is up. And like even the chicken is invented. A lot of people don't know that chicken don't exist in nature. Chicken was crafted. You see, and so was a cow. You see, a cow was crafted, from an original ox or whatever you have in the border buffalo. You see, and so it's clear that the African culture in the future could help the world in itself by just giving the world its culture. African culture is organic. In the old villages, they'd have one place over here where they put all of the waste, and then after it composted, then they'd go over there and grow stuff, and then do it over here again. Just keep moving it around. The Europeans, what they would do is just put all of the waste in one area in the river.
Yeah.
Just destroyed everything with the amount of nitrogen from human waste and animal waste. And so we have to start tying agriculture to spirit and the like, because there is no culture without agriculture. You see? And so you got to have that agricultural piece. And if we articulate that to the world from an African perspective, then Africa could be contributing something very, very important to the world. And that is sustainability, because you can't use up all of the resources. They're gobbling up all the resources left and right. Ain't but so much tin on the planet. It's finite. They didn't give us a black credit card for tin on the planet. It's finite. It's going to go out sometime. Gold is going to end up. So with that idea, what did Africans do? Africans utilize earth to build. Why can't you utilize earth to build? Why do you have to use trees? These type of things. Understanding nature and sustainability is the future of African culture, in our opinion.
The floor is still open for any comments or questions. Rodney, do you have any comments or questions?
Not a question, but I'd like to exactly know how to get the book he was showing. I'd like to learn that. See if I can,
Introduction.
yeah, I'd like to have that book in my collection. So if you could give me the link to it, I'd appreciate that.
I have a question. If someone wanted to, if one of us wanted
introduce
to,
yourself, please. Who is this?
oh, I apologize. This is Jamel.
Okay, go ahead.
My question is, if one of us wanted to get more involved, like African culture, and possibly join the community in the future, is it too late, or is that still possible?
Of course not. Always a possibility. The purpose of Oyotunji was to create a place, a real solid foundational place, like a town city. It's a village, it's a town. The purpose was to create that, so then from there, other satellite communities could pop up. And so Oyotunji has created other groups and communities throughout the country. Some are dependent, and some are independent of our kingdom. However, they have ceremonies that tie you to spirit. They have rituals. They have festivals. They have lectures. They have educational series, all sorts of wonderful things. And some of them even have rappers now that are doing cultural Yoruba hip hop for the American Orisha audience. And Oyotunji is always, our gates are always open to people who want to come and be a part. We don't like the word join, because it means you got to join something now. It's like joining it's already you. It's just a matter of accepting your ancestral inheritance. When you're ready to accept it, we're here. It's about you. You got to accept it. You don't have to join us. We've accepted it. And once you accept it, then you get an obligation. Your obligation becomes community, family, and that type of thing. Because, you know, I always tell the people who like to be hot shots, when you're going to be a hot shot, you're going to be by yourself now. You're not going to have no babysitters. You're not going to have too much any people to depend on. That's the purpose of a large family in our culture. So when you join in, when you call it joining in, you are actually being supported. A better way would have been to say, when can I come be supported by you wonderful people? Because that's what we all need is support. Okay? So you can go on our website, you can watch videos, you can continue to be a part. You can watch from a distance, or you can come put hands on. We do a lot of hands on here in the kingdom. So we build our own stuff, build our own houses and stuff. So therefore, we're always busy together.
Melvin, do you have a question or comment?
Yes. I like the word surplus that you use, because Africa has like a rich history. And then when you went, because you was talking about family values, principles, and code of ethics. And I really like when you talked about the when the children, they had to like do a 40-mile walk. That goes to show that you want to discipline the kids.
Of course, yes. Yes. That's called Akinkonju. Akinkonju means courage. And so that's the name of the men's group that supplies those rights for the boys. And it's actually 20 different things that they have to do. And it builds character. It builds discipline. It builds a lot. And it builds a sort of fortitude that the young child could then have 20 years from now, 30 years. Because, 40, 50 years down the road, things pop back on you. And now you say, wow, I didn't even know that would have helped me so much in my life. And so that's what it does for the young people. And also in terms of young people are taught to take up an instrumentation, learn how to play the drums, the shekere, the various African traditional instruments, the dundun drum, the gangan drum, bata drum, the conga drums, the shekere, the agogos, these type of the instruments of our culture. And it gives the young boys a crew to be with, because boys are always going to group up into crews. And if you don't offer them a decent crew or decent gang, so to speak, they're going to make their own. And when they make their own, they're going to make it out of anger. And they're going to terrorize the community. And so you got to have gangs for young people, whether it's a drumming guild, art guild, dancing guild, something they like to do. But when you're around a community that offers things to people rather than charges you for everything, then you have young people who grow up with all type of skills that you're going to need anyway. That's why I don't get America. Why you charge the kids all this money to go to school when you're going to need them anyway? Suppose they say, we're not going to do it. They don't have a second generation to be doctors. So you have to give.
Thank you very much, KBC. Let's give him a warm round of applause for all taking his time this morning, gracing our class. Everyone, put your cameras on and give KBC a warm round of applause. Let's appreciate King Adefumi II of Oyotunji African Village that is located in South Carolina for the time he has taken this morning. I'm going to post more information on Oyotunji African Village on our class page, and I hope that you'll be able to join in the efforts in promoting African culture, in keeping African traditions alive, and also instilling a lot of the traditions in the lives of young people growing up in America today. So, it's very important because you don't have to travel all the way to Africa to live or learn about African culture. It's right here in South Carolina. And the good thing is you're able to blend or at least have African traditions and culture represented right here in the Americas. And at the same time, the vision that I see for Oyotunji is also to be able to embrace, the younger people growing up in different places, in different cities, and instill in them so that they can be more useful for to society. And with that, I would like to introduce you to a couple of people. We have our Royal Highness. I don't know if you can see her. So I'm gonna sit in front of you, KBC. Sorry. Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Can you hear her?
Alafia, Ekaro.
Ikaro.
Yes, I can hear you. You can tell them who you are.
I'm Her Royal Grace Iya Adejuola. I'm Abiasi's wife. Oh, I can use this one.
Oh, okay. Javier says he's been sitting for too long and his back now hurts. Okay. You can go ahead.
No better. I'm Miss Olori, which means that I am a wife of the king. What should I say?
Just introduce yourself. How you've been involved in Oyotunji, and
I
your
grew up
role.
in traditional Yoruba culture. I'm first generation born in America. My entire paternal line is from Yoruba land. And so I've always had a Yoruba name. And so I've always felt that I was a little different. And I've stood out, but I remember growing up in Chicago, with the culture in Chicago, I would hear my mom speak about this place. And as a young person, as an adolescent, and as a teenager, I would tell my god sisters, like, we're not going there. So when they go, we don't want to go. We wanted to be in the city. We wanted to hang out. We didn't want to do all this African stuff. But it just so happens that my destiny led me here. I literally live here. And it's just so funny, the irony in the future. And so while I'm here, I support His Majesty and the community. I work with the women of the community. I try to support and fill in the gaps in the areas of hospitality, when His Majesty has guests or when we have people come into the community. I try to be a mediator of sorts. I'm a solution-oriented person. And so I try to bring solutions to the table as we try to run and build the community. That pretty much, in the most simplest form, is my role and responsibility. And to raise our prince. We have a 4-year-old, very active, and yeah, so that's also my role. One of my primary roles is to raise our prince. Adejuola Babatunde Ifalowo Akinjole Adefumi. That is his name. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Do you have any questions for her? We can take a few questions for the Queen, or if you would like to comment. All right, no questions.
I just want to say Ikaro to my.
Thank you very much, Adupe.
Alafia, I enrolled you.
Alafia.
How you in this?
Hi,
How you on
Oyotunji
this
family. I'm gonna find a way,
So we have a couple of Oyotunji indigents here, those who live primarily in this village, and many of them have joined us for class this morning. Let's start first. Yeah, Maria, are you on your phone? Okay, so I can. Yeah, Maria. Yeah, Maria is like mother. As you heard earlier from Yashango, who spoke earlier. So she's the executive director of this village, and she takes care of a lot of activities here. So I'll give her a few moments to introduce herself and tell you what you can come to do in Oyotunji. Yeah, Maria, you have the floor.
Ikaro, everyone. It is wonderful that you're here with us today. Thank you for technology, Ogun. Ashe. Good morning. As I said before, my name is Ayodele Adeleye, and I have been here about 2 years as executive director of Oyotunji African Village. And like I tell everyone, Yoruba culture saved my life. I was a Christian at one point, meaning a lot of my life. But when I came into the Yoruba culture and started visiting the village before I assumed the position, it was very, very kind of what you call confusing, because I am of Jamaican Chinese descendant. And most of what was I grew up with was in similarity to the way that I live now. And I just wanted to say that I have children, grandchildren, and I just buried one of my great grandchildren on yesterday, day before yesterday. But if you would like to come to Oyotunji at any point in time, our numbers are on our website. Just give us a call at least 24 to 48 hours before your trip. And we would love volunteers. We love people to stay after they volunteer also. My role here as executive director mainly is to call it this with no explanation. Oyotunji African Village is the Mecca in North America of Yoruba culture. It has been here 51 years. And the next 49 years to the 100th year, we're trying to set the stage for our younger generation. And we appreciate all the help we can get. We love the financial help, but we like for you to become an ambassador for us and let everyone know that we are here. A lot of people already know that we are here, but they haven't come yet, but we are expecting them. We love to have you at any time. Like I said, just make a phone call and make your trek to us. Our king would love to have your company and all of the villagers. Any questions?
Any questions for Maria while I'm chasing the rooster so that you see a live chicken? I know for many people, New York City, you only see chickens in the freezer section of your grocery store.
Hello?
So, you hear the sound of roosters, and in African traditional societies where we didn't have clocks or watches or every morning, these little guys were what used to wake you up in the morning. So you try to show you guys. If you come back again, I'll let you know.
Dr.
Do you have a question?
Kabiyesi wanted me to tell them how hard the transition for myself. And
yes. So for those of you that have other classes, you're welcome to log off. But we're going to continue the discussion. So for those who are able to stay, Maria would like to talk about her transition from her previous life and her coming to Oyotunji. Go ahead.
The transition for me was very not so much as devastating as it was an experience that I could never describe in words. For about 22 years, I was a prophetess in the Christian church. My parents both are Christians. One was a United Methodist parishioner, and my father was a African American Episcopal minister. And I grew up in a Christian home. But even though that my father was of the Christian religion, we still practice Yoruba culture through Gitigala and Jamaican descendancy. It was very hard for me. And when I was in the Christian religion, there were so many confusing actions and contradictions from what their Bible said to how I felt. It was more paper and orders and rules and regulations, and it made the spirit of what we were supposed to be serving God very confusing for me. So I kind of stopped going to church. I stopped prophesying, I stopped preaching, I stopped doing all of that because I felt confusion in my spirit. So I tried getting into Yoruba culture. I started looking into spiritualness. I started studying voodoo for many years since the age of 25. And I started practicing those types of spirituality because it made me feel good in my spirit. When I used to go to church, I didn't feel any change. All I went to do was dress up, preach, talk, and then leave. So that's my transition. Was very hard because I was in that higher echelon of the religion, of Christian religion. And when I eventually, before then, when I started kind of backing off of Christian religion, most of the hierarchy, the preachers, the deacons, they began to not like my messages that I had. And I was ostracized from the Christian church. So I went from the United Methodist to the African Methodist to the Pentecostal Holiness, which is much closer to Yoruba culture, because in Yoruba culture, we do speak in tongues. We do cast out bad spirits. We do have in Yoruba culture a greater discernment, but no Orisha, you know? So when the Orisha part of it came to me, it seemed like it solidified my spirit. And my transition was a much easier because I could more relate to what was being said in Ifa and Orisha tradition than I could in the Bible. That's what I have to say.
Any questions for Iya Yodili?
Yes, I have a question.
Who is this? Please speak louder.
This is Zachariah.
Who is this? Please speak louder. Oh, Zach, yes.
Yeah, peace to you.
Zach, yes.
You're doing peace to you. And I know from my understanding, I know that I kind of
Hold on one
how
second, Zach. Hold on one second. We can't hear you, so they're turning up the volume. Hold on 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I was listening when you said that the transition for you was difficult because of what you were raised in understanding, and how that big of a change can impact you in a way. So I know personally for me, I don't go to church as much anymore because of all of that, the things and regulations, like you just said. Like I still have my beliefs, but I know just being in that environment was something that I didn't kind of connect with, if you kind of understand. Like I didn't really, like you said, I didn't really understand what they were doing. I didn't partake in sometimes like what they were doing, but I still had my beliefs. So for you to just like somewhat change and find a whole new like somewhat passion, like I commend that, and I find that to be really interesting.
Thank you so much. If you are a spiritual person, you can discern so many times that things are not right. And if you grew up in that environment of the Christian religion, when you make that transition, now you're going to be on your own because family is going to say you're losing your mind. That's not what's going on because the Yoruba culture and anything in African spirituality has been demonized so much by Hollywood and the white man, period. Because we have the power. We are the power. And it is hard for your family to understand that you're just moving to a higher level because Yoruba culture, African spirituality is a higher level of being. And that is the best part about it. You want to be the best of anything that you are involved with, and especially spirituality. So why not go to the best? We are the first and we are the best. So I guess that's why I become disenfranchised with it so much because it didn't take me anywhere. And I'm going to say this very bluntly because in the church you pay tithes, you pay offerings, and I saw everyone getting blessed, and I got this and that and all this, and nothing happened for me. So, but since I've been in African spirituality and so much that I, in the morning when I wake up, I just have to pinch myself sometimes because I'm happy and I'm fulfilled, and that's what I think the most.
I hear you on
I
that,
hear you on that,
yeah, your daily,
I
because
only arrived on
I only
Saturday,
arrived on Saturday,
and
and coming from New York City, I can tell you I woke up differently this morning.
I woke up
I
differently
woke up
yesterday,
differently yesterday.
so
So,
it's so calm
it's
over
so
here,
calm
and
over
then
here. And then the
support,
support,
the
the
spirituality
spirituality
aspect,
aspect,
um,
um,
it's
it's
very
very
empowering
empowering
in
in
terms
terms
of
of
self-discovery.
self-discovery.
So
So
for
for
many
many
of
of
the
the
young
young
people
people
nowadays
nowadays,
who
those looking to
transform
transform
their
their
life,
life,
you
you
know,
know,
you
you
should
should
come
come
to
to
Oyotunji and
Oyotunji,
find
find
out
out
how
how
to
to
renew,
renew,
rejuvenate,
rejuvenate,
revalue,
revalue,
brand
rebrand
yourself
yourself
in
in
terms
terms
of
of
your
your
search
search
for
for
the
the
self,
self,
in
in
terms
terms
of
of
recreating
recreating
your
your
identity,
identity,
in
in
terms of
terms of
learning
learning
about
about
African
African
culture,
culture,
in
in
terms of
terms of
giving
giving
yourself
yourself
more
more
value,
value,
educating
educating
yourself
yourself
about
about
Africa
Africa,
before
before
most
most
of
of
the
the
traditions
traditions
that
that
have
have
been
been
lost.
lost.
So this is
So this is
a small
it's a small
community,
community,
and we know
and
that
we
it's
know
going
that it's
to
going to
expand,
expand,
and many
and
people
many
will
people
know
will
more
know more
about it
about it
in
in
the
the
future.
future.
So
So
that's
that's
why
why
one
one
of
of
my
my
reasons
reasons
for
for
coming
coming
this
this
weekend,
weekend,
besides
besides
the
the
King's
King's
Day
Day
celebration,
celebration,
which
which
I'm
I'm
going to
gonna
share
share
some
some
pictures
pictures
with
with
you
you
on
on
our
our
class
class
page,
page,
was
was
also
also
to
to
give
give
students
students
the
the
opportunity
opportunity
to
to
see
see
some of
some
the
of the
things
things
they've been
they've
learning
been learning
about in the
about in the
textbook,
textbook,
and
and
to
to
hear
hear
from
from
indigenous
indigenous
who
who
live in
live in
Oyotunji
Oyotunji
about
about
some
some
of
of
the
the
activities
activities,
or
or
talking
talking
about
about
African
African
trade
trade and
and commerce
commerce and
and
African
African
continent
continent prior
prior
to
to the
the
transatlantic
transatlantic slave
slave
trade.
trade.
Very,
Very,
very
very
important.
important.
And
And I think
today's
today's
discussion
discussion
sums up
sums up
what we've
what we've
started the
started the semester
semester
with,
with,
in terms of talking
in
about
terms of
Africa
talking about
before
Africa
the
before
1500,
right?
and
And
Africa up
Africa
to
up to
the
the
transatlantic slave trade
transatlantic
ending,
slave
and the
trade
impact that
and
it
the
had on
impact that
Africa.
had on Africa.
And most of
And
the
most
impact
of
of the
the
that era of the
that era of the
transatlantic slave trade
transatlantic slave
is
trade
what
is what
Kabiesi, which
Kanye
means king, um, discussed with
discussed
us
with
today.
us today.
So before we
So
round up
before
our
we round up
discussion,
our
I
discussion,
would like,
I would like,
if His Royal
if
Majesty
His
does
Royal
not mind,
Majesty does not mind,
to inform us
to inform
this
us
area that we
this
are,
area
because
that we
last week,
are,
I
because
told you
last week,
guys
I
that I
told
was
you guys
coming
that
to
I was coming to
Oyotunji
Oyotunji
village,
village,
and
and
it's
it's
based
based on
on
the
the
Golagishi
Olagichi
land,
land,
and
and
instrumental
instrumental
in
in
the
the
food
food
production
production
and
and
plantation
plantation
system
system
in
in
the
the south during the slave trade era. So does Kabiesi mind telling us a little bit about this area that we are and from where this Golagichi Kingdom of Society starts from? And I know when I came here over the summer, he gave us a tour, but I was not satisfied enough because it was such a quick tour. And this time around, I'm here for 1 week. I said, I'm going to leave New York and, I'm not going to do 3-day coming and go. I'm going to be here for 1 week. So after all the festivities are gone and everyone packs up and go, I'm going to be here to experience this location. So Kabiesi, please inform us also about slave economy that has built this area of the South and the contributions of the Golagichi community.
Absolutely, I'd love to. That's one of my favorite subjects because when you learn about South Carolina and the contribution of Africans therein, it draws a whole nother picture for you. Because it began, this area was called Chicora. They called it Chicora. And when the Spanish came and over here, they came, it was documented that they had Africans on board. This is 1565, was the first Europeans to set foot on the mainland of the United States. Was right here at a place called Paris Island, which is a military base today. However, that is where the first Europeans set foot, and that was the Spanish. I forget his last name, but it's a dude named Pedro. And he came over, and when he left, they had to leave because the Indians in this area chased them out. But they left a lot of diseases and helped to wipe out a lot of the local people. They left and took one guy with him, one local Indian, if you will, took him back to Spain and got him to tell them that America was coated in gold. Streets were paved in gold, this, that, and the third. And that then sent the Spanish back over. However, the African people who came over, some of them escaped and moved into the lands with the local Yamasi nation. And so when people say, well, the Yamasi of the original Black people in America and slavery didn't happen and we've always been here, well, they stretch the truth just a little bit. But the Yamasi people did take in the African people and start to build and create with them. And that was the first Gullah Geechee. Okay, the word Gola comes from the Gula people of Senegambia region. Geechee comes from the Kisi people. The Spanish couldn't say Kisi, so they said Geechee. And so they inhabit the South Carolina area, pretty much from Jacksonville, Florida to Jacksonville, North Carolina, from the Atlantic Ocean, 36 miles inland. That entire corridor is called the Gullah Geechee corridor. And the Africans who were brought to this area came from the Barbados. Because remember, the Barbados was up and running as a slave economy for generations already. And they left the Barbados and came to South Carolina. The first Europeans to come here from the British Europeans, the first Britons to come here were called the Lords Proprietors. It was 7 families, 7 gentlemen. And if you drive around the local area, you'll still see their names on roads and signs and bridges. But they were the first turkeys to come over here and destroy the land and lay the foundations for what will be the worst treatment of human beings on the planet. And it all started with the rice production. Once the Europeans learned how that the Africans knew how to grow rice, then they went and emptied the Senegambia region, primarily because the Senegambians were docile people. They were calmer. They were eloquent in stature, according to the Europeans. Nigerians, however, and they rice. People from Biafra, this area, were brought to this area as well. But a lot of them, the people from the Biafra region, like Nigerians and Dahomians and Cameroonians, they sent them upstate South Carolina to Orangeburg, Mecklenburg, and all of those Spartanburg all of the birds, because that's where the Germans were. The Germans are the bird people. They lived up there, and they would have been dealing with Nigerians a long time. So that's why and Nigerians gave a lot of hell to the plantation owners. And so the plantation owners couldn't keep up with the Nigerians, so they started getting Senegambians. And in 1 year, they were bringing in something like 20,000 people from Gambia region, you know, and then remember, very few slave ships came from Africa to South Carolina. They always came from the islands. So they go to the islands and figure out, you know, and the Europeans were clever because they'd have cells or jail cells with Gambians, Nigerians, Togo. So whoever you wanted, you just walked up to it and got it. And so the Gambians came here and grew rice. And that rice industry stretched from Jacksonville, Florida, pretty much up to Georgetown, South Carolina. And within that corridor, the amount of wealth that was amassed through and for the rice industry hasn't been matched to this day. No industry has matched that to this day. So the amount of rice that Africans grew, the amount of infrastructure that they built to grow the rice was astounding, because we always talk about the Egyptian pyramids, but as being a great feat of African ingenuity. But the rice production in South Carolina and North Carolina was 10 times the Egyptian pyramids. So if you think about the square footage and the volume of stone that it takes to build those pyramids in Egypt, the rice production in South Carolina embodied 10 times more labor, 10 times more sediment removed from the earth to build this rice. And the South Carolina Europeans enjoyed a wealth that was unseen in Europe, even to this day. You know, and so when rice went out, cotton came in. By the time cotton came in, the United States was falling apart. The Union was falling apart because the people in the North were funding the slavery in the South through insurance companies, primarily out of Connecticut, like the Hartford and all of those insurance companies. And so they called it Southern Work and Northern Money, I think is the name of the book. I forget the name of the book, but it explains it. It shows you how the North, Southern rights and Northern is, but it shows you how the North got upset that the South off of these Africans, so they wanted. So furthermore, the Civil War ensued as a product of that discontent. And after the Civil War began, a lot of small communities here in South Carolina, there was one raid called the Stormo Rebellion, where a group of Africans led by a guy from the Congo led an expedition and destroyed rice plantations all the way from Charleston to Jacksonville, right up the road here. And so Africans didn't take it laying down. There were tons of revolutionary revolts against slavery in this area, to the point that they had outlawed the drum, because the drum was being used to make these people, to rile up the black people, to get them going. The drum was used, and when they played the drum, they got powerful. And the white people outlawed the drum. Because at nighttime, some of these communities, they could hear them. Like a village like ours would be far in the woods, and at nighttime, the white people could hear the drums being played as they worship the gods and fight in America. And for a country that embodies freedom, the word freedom, 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 we don't talk about the largest freedom fight against oppression in America happened right down the road here. 300 Africans, you know, got together and tried to take over. It was almost, South Carolina would almost became a African state, just like Haiti. And so Harriet Tubman worked this area as well. A lot of people don't know that. Harriet Tubman came right through these woods and freed African people. And at one time, she freed almost 800 African people. However, she was the one who got the first Black woman to lead a military raid. And to this day, she never got paid for it. However, she was the one who got the Union Army through all of these back creeks. Estuarious environment was primarily more water than land. And so she knew how to navigate it because she was freeing people. So in essence, this area of South Big Box, Mao Zedong had nothing on what these planters in South Carolina were doing to oppress people and to amass wealth. And if you drive to Charleston right now, you can see all of that wealth. You can still see the wealth. And it's sad because the shoe is still on the other foot. And the Europeans still have all the wealth, and the black people still don't have any. And it's just been like that from day one, pretty much in the United States, for many, many, many reasons. But it's not any fault of the Africans, of course. However, you can see that wealth right there in Charleston. You can see that. And so the price for an African back then was probably about $2,000 for an African. Okay. Now, if you put that in today's money, that's probably about $200,000, $300,000 that they would pay for each African. So it was a huge industry, and a lot of money changed hands here in South Carolina. South Carolina is where they started the Revolutionary War when they went against Britain, and King Charles when they fought the Revolutionary War. South Carolina is where the civil shot at the Americans. So the Charleston rascals, as I like to call them, opened fire on the Americans on their fort, on the federal fort, and that began the Civil War. So the Civil War began right up the road here. What else? The French came here, the Spanish came here, the British came here. The only reason we're speaking English today in the United States is because by the time the British got here, the French and the Spanish brought so many diseases, they killed off any opposition, any strong opposition. So the British were allowed to set up right here at Charleston and Beaufort. So, and then of course Jamestown and Plymouth Rock, all of that came way later, maybe even 50, 60 years later. However, this, because after the Civil War, black people, and so they wrote to Lincoln, and Lincoln said, well, start a school, because General Sherman said that these black people don't have any skills for white society. And so they built a not far from here called Penn Center, where they sought to train black people to be some more. Okay, so in that sense, this entire area is the big box. So if America was a belt, as a deep history here, just start that book because it's going to open up a new understanding about America.
Thank you very much, KBC. Wow. So very, very deep history. So again, for those of you who have other classes, I don't want you to miss those classes, but we'll continue for a few minutes. If you have any comments or questions, remember at the beginning of the semester, I said I didn't want to start the class from Africa from 1500 or from Africa from the transatlantic slave trade, which is what most curriculum that you find about history of Black people in America, you know, it usually would start from slavery. And I wanted us to start from, start a discussion on even before the 1500s about the empires, the kingdoms, the civilizations, African culture and traditions, the different ventures, commercial ventures, the trades with different communities. And then, of course, leading to the transatlantic slave trade. So I think KBAC, which, means king, has shed some light and perspective on the economy of this community that were fueled by slave labor. And of course, African slave labor. And in your readings that we're going to start this week, we'll be discussing, or, part of that is the scramble for Africa. So, from the readings, you have discovered that most of what even made the slave trade economy, or the interest in slavery or slave trade, or the transatlantic slave trade, was the need for Europe to industrialize, to develop, to amass wealth, to amass a lot of food, a lot of industry, or amass a lot of land from various locations. And one of those locations was right here. One of the locations in the Americas is right here in South Carolina. And we've heard how Africans were instrumental in food production, how Africans were instrumental in a lot of activities that actually made the United States you know, what it is today. And also a lot of European nations, you know, the contributions of many Africans who we don't hear about, you know, in terms of production of food and, you know, their engagement in the Civil War and so many other activities. The floor is open. I know Rodney said he was having some tech issues, but he had a question, and this goes back to African traditional cultures and society. And he wanted to find out that, you know, part of African culture, does it include how Europeans introduced homosexuality into African communities? And what is the take of the Oba on homosexuality in terms of Black people or African peoples practicing homosexuality, because he doesn't believe that that was a traditional African culture. And further, he believes that this may be one of the reasons why the culture or traditions of many African societies are being wiped out. So does KBAC have any take on that?
You know, I get asked that a lot. I get asked that a lot. And it's only a conversation in America that people even care to even talk about. Who cares what anybody do in their bedroom? You would have to figure a continent with billions of people, well, back then, hundreds of millions of people didn't have no freaky stuff going on. Of course they did. It's just that everything in America is the land of advertising everything you do. It's bizarre because there are societies, especially Malidomas points out that anytime a man could take on feminine attributes, whether it's movements, machinations, or voice, they were seen as special. They were seen as special because it was special. To have a feminine person born or a masculine women born and feminine men born into the world is not a new concept. It's not just because of the milk or the eggs and the food and the advertising. It always existed. But even in America, back in the 1700s, it was undercover. It's always been that way. It's just now that it's coming out. I don't understand why the LGBTQ community feels the need to come and tell the world and that they're colorful people. However, America is the land of doing just that. In Yoruba culture, we have anybody familiar with Tyler Perry? The stuff that Tyler Perry doing, the quote unquote cross dresses, as they call it. Well, in Yoruba culture, we have something called gelede. Gelede is when the men pretty much dress up like women, and like a parody of women, with elongated breasts, elongated buttocks, and they also wear a particular type of carved mask that's in the face of a woman, and the men would go on and do a production, a cultural production, and imitate the machinations of women in the community. They would use a female voice. So basically, it's like, pardon the reference, but it's like what you would have like today, a drag show, where the men dress up and do parody of women for entertainment and comedy. That was done also. And so you have to realize that we have to be open-minded enough to realize that nature is in charge of these things. Nature is in charge of societies. Don't make gay people, make LGBTQ community people. Nature makes them. For instance, hermaphrodites have been around for centuries. And those are people born with both genitalia. And they tend to carry both energies, male and female energies. They're even in nature. I've seen what they call gay lions. That's what they called them. It was a whole documentary. But what it actually is it's a natural phenomenon. They might call it a chemical imbalance, but I like to recognize it as a phenomenon because we don't know that much about it. And so was it something in African society where a man just married a woman, a man, and all the women married women? No, that would be bizarre because who would ever produce any children? right? And so it's got nothing to do with religion. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with the basic natural requirements of the world, you know. Human beings seem to be one of the only creatures that take it to that limit. However, there were women in like the Kakamfo, Madame Tinubu, who had something like 18 wives. Right? And see, that's confusing to a European or especially an American because the think is that, well, and they partying in the house. No, not necessarily, because a wife in African culture is not seen as somebody like to fall in love with. A wife or a husband can be seen as an assistant to life. And so if she's a powerful woman, then she has other women under her that she controls and they do her bidding for her. And for all respects, they're considered to be her wives. But it's not like the American stuff. You know, just like a slave in African culture is not like the American stuff. You know, America just seems to overdo everything and then try to get the rest of the world to follow them. And because this entire thing comes out of the States, this promotion. I don't even think people are promoting heterosexuals that much in the world. However, it happens, it's here, and we have to deal with it. But it should be seen from a spiritual perspective. And if one won't allow themselves to see it from a spiritual perspective, then it should be seen clearly from a chemical perspective. Whether you call it chemical imbalance or you call it chemical improprieties or what have you, there you have it. Did I help out any?
Thank you so much, Kabiyesi. Let's give him a warm round of applause again. I know he had left early after he finished speaking, but thank you so much for shedding light on, many of the discussions that we usually we just hear about in books or in the media. And now we have a one-on-one opportunity to hear from the source, one of African kings located right here in South Carolina, promoter of African cultures and traditions. And also, he's a great historian too, and as many African kings used to be warriors, during times of war, they would take on the baton and they would fight for their kingdoms. They would also be great historians, of course. They had people under them who tell a lot of history. But remember, we had discussed that African traditions was mostly taught through oral history, where you pass down the history from one generation to the other. We didn't have written history. So that's one of the reasons for Europeans to actually take advantage of Africans in terms of them to be able to talk about their history, to prove that a lot of traditions and cultures actually existed prior to European contact in Africa, which for centuries, even up to today, there's been a lot of disputes as to the talents of Africans or the abilities of Africans to build monuments and infrastructure, to develop agriculture, and so on and so forth. So before we end class for today, and I thank those of you that are still here, do you have any last minute questions or comments or feedback in general to the king? Or
Yes,
anyone in your Tunji? There are a couple of people that have actually gathered here for class today.
I guess this is Rodney.
And what's your name?
This is Rodney. I just would like to thank the king for his wisdom and his time. I appreciate the history. I happen to be a history.
I think the elder has to unmute his microphone.
And
it's
and let's see.
Yes. My name is Ekaro. My name is Greg.
And Ekaro in Yoruba means good morning. So they're saying good morning and they've introduced themselves. And thank you so much for joining the class and hanging around late today. I have another class session this afternoon on Black women in Africa and in the Americas. So I'm going to post the link on the discussion board or send it to you by your email. So if you would like to attend that, and we'll be talking with women in Oyotunji and also learning about some of the goddesses and their impact that they've had in African spirituality, the role of women in African traditional societies. So I look forward to seeing some of you there this afternoon at 2 o'clock. I will send you the Zoom link. It's going to be different. So thank you so much. And see you next Monday. Let's give another warm round of applause to Kabi. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Yoruba. So let's see everyone say Odabo.
Odabo.
Thank
Professor,
you. And
Professor,
you
you're gonna
guys
make me
later.
start.
Have a great day from Oyotunji African Kingdom in South Carolina.
I am gonna start.
I see Brother Rakmel. Do you want to say something quickly?
Yes, I'm saying that you've made me fall in love
mute.
with them.
I see you're muted, but I can't hear you.
Oh.
That's crazy. We can hear him, but you probably
hear me?
can't. We can hear him on this side.
Oh, Professor,
you gotta
can
fix
hear
your
me, but
mic. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon, and see you next week in New York. Bye-bye. God bless you all.
Odabo.
And make sure you visit Oyotunji soon. The website is www.oyotunji.org. And Oyotunji simply means Oyo Kingdom has woken up again. So this time around in South Carolina.
Professor, can you hear me now?
So you read of Oyo Empire when you were learning about African kingdoms and African societies. So you heard of Oyo Empire. So Oyo Empire was instrumental and still kind of is in Yoruba cultures, Yoruba tradition, kingdoms for Yoruba people in West Africa. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.